It's Emil. It's Emil Guillermo. Emil Amok to you. Welcome to Emil Amok's Takeout, our takes on all things considerable. And if you are listening or if you're media savvy and like have one ear on a TV and one ear on a computer, and you know the president just gave his speech, and we're going to give you the instant analysis, the instant lagniappe of what the president said today here on Emil Muck's Takeout. Like I said, my takes on all things considerable. And is there anything more considerable than this voting rights battle that we now find ourselves in a week after January 6th? You know, after January 6th, we had a year. And isn't it funny that after a year of January 6th, there is nothing that anyone can say that this country can agree on? We got all the video images and all the, just everything that happened on January 6, 2020, 2021 rather. We saw all the video images the year after, and astonishingly, they did nothing to pull our nation together. It's incredible, isn't it? I mean, it just shows you how deep rooted this polarization is. I mean, you probably saw a lot of the video from January 6th and saying, oh, that's terrible. There's policemen getting tortured and beaten, and Congress in fear, and there's a gallows and a noose meant for Vice President Pence, and you see Vice President Pence running inside the Capitol. And do they bring us all together? Not really. And that denoted to me that our democracy's in trouble, real trouble. I mean, we already know that our democracy's in trouble, right? You look at policing, you look at, race, issues of race throughout our country. You look at, just how coronavirus is impacting different segments of our society, the inequality in our democracy, in all things. It's astonishing, right? And yet, January 6th goes right to the core, right? It's like trouble in the key of C. No sharps, no flats. It just goes directly to where it has to go. Your right to vote. And now there is one group, one party in particular, that is ready to take your voting right away, doing nothing. It's sort of like the guys who run out the clock. Don't you hate those guys in football? There's like a minute and a half left, but you got no timeouts, and they just let the clock run down. And it's sort of like that now in American politics. There is a certain group, well, let's just say who they are. The Republican Party wants to take your vote away. They have sold their group on the idea that the election was stolen last November. So they are now morally justified to steal it back, and while they're at it, just control all voting, period. Have key election officials, have key laws in states that will make it harder, not easier to vote. And two key provisions, or two pieces of legislation at the Senate need to be passed, and the Republicans are blocking it. And that's where we are. And that's why Joe Biden, whose presidency is in trouble, went to Atlanta today. And he went to Atlanta in the same way that he went to South Carolina to talk to Representative Clyburn. He needs the Black and Indigenous people of color vote. And he knows that the voting rights restrictions are out there to restrict us. And in his speech today, he had the litany. He talked about, blacks, and he mentioned Asian Americans by name. That's why Asian Americans have to give something to Biden. He's put us on the map. He's put us on the agenda. He started with Kamala Harris, and then with all his executive orders from the very beginning. The response to the scapegoating, the Kung flu, China virus baloney. Biden's been there for us. I think that's clear. But his speech today really just put it out there about why it's important to get the two voting rights bills, the Freedom to Vote Act, which would make voting a national holiday so that people could vote. That's one of the things that the Freedom to Vote Act does. Number two, that the John Lewis Voting Rights Act restores the key provision in the existing Voting Rights Act that was gutted by the Supreme Court a few years back that makes sure that the federal government has the right to reject discriminatory reforms to voting rights in states. The federal government has the last word and can reject any laws or any changes. Right now, that was taken out. It makes the Voting Rights Act less powerful, less impactful than it was. Those two bills, the Freedom to Vote Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, they're on the Senate's agenda, and yet they can't get it through. They can't get it through unless Biden can convince the Democrats to act in concert, pull some Republicans in there with him. And the only thing that might help is if the filibuster rule is changed. I know some of you think, oh, filibuster. You know filibuster well, Emil. That's what you do every day at 2 o'clock Pacific. No, this isn't a filibuster. I can leave at any time. But the change in the filibuster rule, of course, the Republicans were against it. So this might be a one-time change. And Biden in this speech says he was for those two bills, the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. He was for them. And he was also for the change to the filibuster law, if it means getting past what he called Jim Crow 2.0. And this is an important thing. If you're thinking, this is just another kind of voting, that kind of thing. I mean, this is the reason why the King family said no celebration without voting rights legislation. Almost made it rhyme there. But no celebration without legislation on MLK Day. And MLK Day coming up, that is kind of like this deadline, and that makes this speech that Biden just gave a kind of point of desperation, because it's unclear whether or not he's going to get all the Democrats plus some Republicans to vote for anything. And certainly Senator Joe Manchin, the West Virginia, whatever he is he he's not really a Democrat. He says he wants to be like Senator Byrd, the former Klansman, who was actually pretty liberal on legislation when he was around. He knew filibuster, incidentally. Senator Byrd. He used to read from the Peloponnesian Wars. That was his big thing. I mean, the filibuster rules were you didn't have to You didn't have to come up with an original speech. You could read. You could read from the Peloponnesian Wars. That was kind of a stroke of genius, wouldn't you think? So anyway, Jim Crow 2.0. That's what we're trying to avoid. And I'll get to Biden's speech today. We'll get into it. Um, anyway, this is Emil Muck's Takeout. Thank you for being here. Follow us on Twitter at Emil Muck. Maybe you're listening to us or watching us on Twitter at Emil Muck. Catch the replays on amok.com. You can see my columns on the ALDEF blog, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund blog. You can also catch us on Facebook, where you can, of course, like us. Do the things that they want you to do on Facebook. They want you to like and, give me a thumb or give me a heart or give me something on Facebook at emilguillermo.media. We're here Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific Live. Gave you a little lagniappe, a little analysis. I'm going to continue on, but this is, as I say, I call this the micro talk show of the AAPI and the AAXs, Asian American Pacific Islanders, Asian American X, Chinese, AACs, AK, AAJs, Japanese, AJ, the AA Cambodians, they would be the AACAs, ACA, ACA, or the Asian American Filipinos, AAF, that's what I am. Or if you're none of those, you're certainly a member of the ALLs, the rest of you. Anyway, so welcome to our show. I am Emil Guillermo, a news person, award-winning, author, sometimes, public one-man show performer, writer, columnist, humorist. Here we are. But we'll this is show 220, and what we do on this show is we ask the question, WDAAAT, what does an Asian American think? I mean, what does an Asian American think? Do we just let this voting rights debate go without us? Do we just sort of like, this is just a dog and pony show, what Biden did with Harris, going down to Atlanta, going down to the Ebenezer Church, going down to talk to a group of people. It was a big photo op. I don't know. I mean, that's the cynic. The cynics would say, oh, it's just a photo op. I think it was more. I think it was more today because there's a lot on the line. I know there were groups out there that pulled out. They did not join the president, or they said they were not going to pay attention to the speech. He had to go back to Washington. They said it's time for action, that we don't have enough action. It's time for not hot rhetoric, but it's time for real action. I don't blame them. But this has been a kind of, I don't want to call it a totally dysfunctional Democratic administration, but it has had some issues because of where it's had to pick up the pieces after 4 years of a chaotic and divisive Republican administration. I mean, I think you got to give Biden a little credit for kind of picking up the pieces and trying to move things forward. But we also have the situation with the Senate where Biden has his plan, his vision, and because the Democrats don't have the Senate, they barely have the House. They have the House, they don't have the Senate, but they can't get things passed. They can get to a situation where it's a deadlock and then the vice president breaks a tie, but Who would have thought that there would be one or two Democrats on the Senate side who would just block things, requiring just a just an ounce of bipartisanship of maybe one or two Republicans coming over. I mean, that's why you might have heard the president speak in very, very stark ways. Like he says, what do you want? Do you want voter suppression and election subversion? Or do you want a free and fair vote, free and fair elections and democracy? Are you for voter suppression and election subversion? Really? Are you for MLK? Are you for George Wallace? Are you for Lincoln or are you for Jefferson Davis? I mean, there's some stark things to put out in the South. And then he said, God, even in the old Senate, he talked about his days in the Senate. He said, even in his days in the Senate, he got Strom Thurmond to vote for voting rights. So he's trying to shape the debate so people know exactly what's at stake. It's not just his presidency. And I think the groups that bailed on the president today, well, I don't want to say they were a tad unfair, but I think they were just out there trying to put pressure on the president to say, okay, get out there and prove to us that you're not doing some dog and pony thing. Prove to us that this is more than hot rhetoric. I think he did. I think he put it in terms that people can understand, especially after January 6th. I mean, it's pretty stark there when he says, hey, are you for voter suppression and election subversion? How can you be for that? Are you for MLK? Are you for George Wallace? Are you for George Wallace, really? What, do you have a thing for Lurleen? What? He puts it that way. I think people understand. But although, there's a lot of nouveau Republicans out there looking at George Wallace saying, George Wallace is sounding awfully good right now. Isn't he more like Donald Trump than you? See, that's hard to imagine that that's where we are, but that's where it seems like we are. The pendulum is swinging when we're starting to talk about the suppression of voting, election subversion. So there was this part where Biden really put it plainly. He talked. We'll cut the orchestra. Biden talked about Jim Crow 2.0.
Jim Crow 2.0 is about two insidious things: voter suppression and election subversion. It's no longer about who gets to vote. It's about making it harder to vote. It's about who gets to count the vote and whether your vote counts at all. It's not hyperbole. This is a fact. Look, this matters to all of us. The goal of the former president and his allies is to disenfranchise anyone who votes against them. Simple as that. The facts won't matter. Your vote won't matter. They'll just decide what they want and then do it. That's the kind of power you see in totalitarian states, not in democracies. We must be vigilant, and the world is watching.
And see, that is sort of like the high perspective. The world is watching to see what the premier democracy is going to do. And he says it bluntly. I don't think he's ever said it this bluntly. He says it's not about, he says, and I've never heard it put in terms of Jim Crow 2.0. But the two insidious things: voter suppression, election subversion. Those two things. It's no longer about who gets to vote, it's about making it harder to vote. It's about who gets to count the vote and whether your vote counts at all. And that's why this thing matters to all of us. He says the goal of the former president's allies is to disenfranchise anyone who votes against them. Simple as that. The facts won't matter. Your votes won't matter. They'll just decide what they want and then they'll do it. That's the kind of power you see in totalitarian states, not in democracies. I mean, how can you be a voting member of this great democracy and not be touched by that? I mean, I know there's a lot of skeptics out there who say, oh, yeah, okay, Mr. Biden, okay, President Biden, take some action. Well, he's trying, but he's got to sell it on the American people. And then it's up to the American people to call their senators and let them know. And I'm talking in particular with the Republican groups. I mean, there have been a number of stories over the last couple of days showing that Asian Americans were contributors to pro January 6 groups, that Asian Americans, well, we know that there are a large Republican contingency among the Republicans. We know there are a lot of big time Asian Americans who are Republicans. Mrs. Mitch McConnell. I met Elaine Chao. We're friendly. I've known Elaine for a long time. But, you know, there are Asian American Republicans. They need to speak out. Someone said the other day, oh, God, I can't believe it. I like Dick Cheney. After all the Dick Cheney. Well, first of all, my friend said, I got to support Donald Rumsfeld. No, Rumsfeld is dead. It's Cheney that is coming around. But that's because there are principled Republicans. There are. And it really is a time to look at the principled Republicans, recognize them as patriots, the real patriots, and understand that there is a way out of this Jim Crow 2.0. Because if we don't get these things passed, my God, the election, the midterms, 2022, well, actually, really, it's 2024 we're looking at. But that's what's endangered. If a lot of the state legislation passes and if a lot of these obstacles to limit our vote passes, we got to fight that. So, I got to hand it to Biden. He talked about the two bills, said it was time to pass them, and then he said we have no option but to change the Senate rules, including getting rid of the filibuster for this, so that Republicans can't block the vote, can't block the debate. Maybe just do it on a limited basis just for this, because truly, our democracy really is at stake, And he said at some point, he put it really in stark terms, because that's the way that people will understand. We stand for democracy, yes or no? Is that what we do? You want to be on the side of Dr. King or George Wallace, of John Lewis or Bull Connor, Abraham Lincoln or Jefferson Davis? You put it in those terms, call your senator. You got to get this done. And of course, the activists who semi-boycotted the speech, they weren't there to, a lot of them were community groups. I think they're right. They got to put pressure on Biden to do the right thing. But I think Biden delivered with his words The question now is, will Biden deliver with action? Will he get people in the Senate? Did he touch the people in the Senate who need to act, who need to look? There's only one guy, one or two, Manchin and Sinema, right? Did this change their minds? The fact that that's probably unlikely could be enough to sink the passage of the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. But it was a good close. He had a good close. He was talking about democracy is who we are. Let's hear from the president.
Democracy is who we are, who we must be, now and forever. So let's stand in this breach together. Let's love good. Establish justice in the gate.
Yeah, that's a good line. Let's love good. I haven't really heard that. Let's love good. If you're going to lead with love in a democracy, yeah, let's love good.
And remember, as I said, this is one of those defining moments in American history.
Now, can you imagine one of the defining moments of American history? You know, Pearl Harbor certainly was a defining moment. I know Harris in her speech compared Pearl Harbor and January 6th. Some people thought that was hyperbole, but if it means our democracy is at stake and what's our response to it, no, that's not hyperbole. So this could very well be, if we could pass these two bills, the Voting Rights Acts, the one named for John Lewis, the one named the Freedom to Vote Act, if we could do that by MLK Day, that could be a defining moment, because here's what's at stake.
Each of those who vote will be remembered by class after class in the 50s and 60s, the 2050s and 60s. Each one of the members of the Senate is going to be judged by history on where they stood before the vote and where they stood after the vote. There's no escape.
That is pretty stark. This is the kind of vote where it will be, where did you stand when, because if these two pieces of legislation do not get passed, and if the filibuster isn't set aside so that these things can pass, what happens in 2022? What happens in 2024? And does the Republican plan of voter suppression and election subversion take effect? Jim Crow 2.0. How did you vote on these bills and on the filibuster? How you voted on that? People can go back and say, oh, racist, non-racist. Here are the racist, here are the non-racist. Oh, the racist won. Is that what we want to see? Or do you want to say, oh, the racist lost? Of course, because this is a democracy. And even Dick Cheney and his daughter, they're backing this up. So even the good, bad, not the racist, but the fracist, the friendly racist, I call them. The fracist can come join the Democrats. So this is Biden, who is, he's a moderate liberal trying to bring the Democrats together. Here's his rallying call.
So let's get back to work. As my grandfather Finney used to say every time I walked out the door in Scranton, he'd say, Joey, keep the faith. Then he'd say, no, Joey, spread it. Let's spread the faith and get this done. May God bless you all, and may God protect the sacred right to vote. Thank you. I mean it. Let's go get this done. Thank you.
And that was Joe Biden. The band played. You know, you see Joe Biden, and he's struggling a little bit, with his, his coughing a bit. he's not the Joe Biden who spoke against Anita Hill back in the 90s. God, Emil, that's like 30 years ago. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's when we first saw him come into prominence. And he's not even the Joe Biden with Obama, right? He's the Joe Biden who is struggling, trying to keep his presidency together, but not merely his presidency and the administration. He's struggling to keep America together, struggling to keep our democracy together. And as I said, it wouldn't be this way if he wasn't handed a broken plate to begin with. A broken plate, fragmented, falling apart, and then a couple of glue guns. And he's struggling to piece things together. But if you were one of those Asian Americans or Latinos or members of the BIPOC community who were for voting rights, who were boycotting, yeah, I think the president delivered. I think he delivered his promise. This was more than just a dog and pony speech. This was a real attempt to try to sell to the American public the significance of voting rights, especially a week after January 6th. If you didn't think our democracy was in trouble after January 6th, well, here it is. Your vote is a target. The Republicans not just want your vote. If you vote against them, they want to suppress it. If you definitely vote against them and still vote, they want to subvert your vote. That's what's at stake. And in very plain English, Joe Biden said, hey, this is what happens in totalitarian states. This isn't what's supposed to happen in democracy. This isn't what's supposed to happen in America, but it's happening. Or it could happen unless the Senate acts. So call your senator. Call your senator. Let them know what you want, what's needed for this to stay America. So I think I'm going to leave it there. Emil Muck's Takeout Live. Joe Biden, when he talks, he wants to be that avuncular guy. He wants to be like the way he ended it, talking about his grandfather. Come on. He said, Joey, keep the faith. He said, no, Joey, spread it. Let's spread the faith. It's that kind of, he didn't end it with Seamus Heaney. But look, you got to give Biden points for trying. He didn't expect the kind of obstacles that he's found. And certainly he didn't expect COVID. So I give him high points, high praise for the voting rights speech today. If you didn't think we were in trouble after the anniversary of January 6th, when the anniversary of January 6th didn't bring America together, well, acknowledge it now. If these voting rights bills don't get passed, and if Jim Crow 2.0 takes hold, we're in more trouble than you think. All right, follow us on Twitter at Emil Amok. See more at amok.com. Oh, by the way, I'm teaching a class in life story, finding the narrative in your life and creating the story in your life that needs to be told. It could be autobiography. It could just be memoir, one. Or maybe it's memoirs, two. I'll teach you how to identify it. And if you take the class, you'll leave with at least a roadmap and a couple of stories. Stagebridge.org is where I'm teaching it. It's all Zoom. Go to amok.com or go to stagebridge.org. You get the links, and it could be fun. All right. Let's see, what else? You can email me. Do people still email? Oh, I just Snapchat Emil. Oh, okay. I don't think I'm on Snapchat. But Emil Amok, you can go to amok.com. You can go to Facebook at emilguillermo.media. I like to say, be here, bang the gong now, 2 p.m. Pacific Live. A little earlier for that lanyap. Episode 104 of Emil Amok's Takeout, the podcast. It's up a few more days. Actually, it'll always be up. But the new episode 105 is coming up this week. But 104, very interesting if you're into colonialism and how a younger generation of Asian Americans are reacting to learning their colonial history. Check it out, Emil Amok's Takeout, episode 104, wherever you podcast. So regular listeners of the show know that when you get to this part of the show, well, thank you. Thank you for making it this. Thank you for lasting. This is the part where I tell you, you're good. You belong. There's no shame. You belong. You're not an imposter. No, you belong here. You have a voice. You have a stake. You belong. And as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be happy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo, back tomorrow. Mahal.